Our next stop on this Western road trip is the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. I'm excited to go in and unbox what's inside. First thing you see when you walk inside is this amazing old school depiction of Tyrannosaurus where it's more upright and its tail is actually dragging on the ground. We know that today this is not how it looks, but this is a beautiful in-look onto how dinosaurs have been depicted through time. And this is one of these very first interpretations of dinosaurs. And I think this is a beautiful thing that they kept it this way, keeping this old school look of it. And this is just a beautiful T-Rex recreation too. I think it's just a beautiful, just first thing that you walk in, this is what you're hit with. So let's keep going deeper into the museum and see what we find. So here we have two plesiosaurs, these elasmosaurs if I had to guess. They have really long necks, and one thing that was very interesting about them is that they actually would have lived in shallow, swampier waters instead of deep water, which is very interesting. So they would use that neck and kind of weave it between some stuff and have their mouth open, kind of like a modern crocodile, to kind of snatch at fish. They were not fast by any means of swimming in, of course, respect to the time, and relatively for swimming, they're faster than us probably, but they have those giant four big paddle fins that just help them swim. They have those very short tail, but if you see their teeth, they look like just kind of cages that would go around and pierce. They were meant for piercing because they would bite into things like fish and marine creatures in these shallow lagoony moor areas. I think these are very beautiful specimens. That's a very good specimen right there, showing them that they would eat those fish. So we came straight to the third floor for the prehistoric journey because I know you're all here for the dinosaurs. So let's go through their prehistoric journey exhibit and see what cool dinosaurs they have in the museum. So here we actually start out in the prehistoric journey with the creatures before the dinosaurs. We have these beautiful sea cockroaches, these sea bugs, trilobites. They're actually invertebrates, meaning they don't have spines. They have these big old crescent-shaped heads with these little flangely things coming off, and they would crawl around. Trilobites are actually very interesting because they molt. Most invertebrates molt. So one trilobite could leave behind hundreds of fossils, not to mention the trace fossils that they leave behind. So whenever you are looking at a trilobite, if you're looking at the crown or the front of the head here, you'll be able to tell if it's a molt by if it's broken, and if it's bent back or bent apart, or if it's curled in a specific way, you can tell if it's a molt. So trilobites are very important and very beautiful creatures that I feel get overlooked a lot. So then we come over here to the explosion of life during what I want to say is the Devonian period. So we get a lot of new life. You get these giant arthropods, you get more trilobites, you get brachiopods, algae, worms for the first time, cyanids or cyanidaria, which would be like jellyfish. And then we get mollusks, like snails, clams, squids, octopus. You get chordates, which are the earliest that turn into the vertebrates. So they start to have spines. So you get this really weird worm thing with a spine on it, with one weird, they're not exactly vertebrates. It's very, very weird. Then we get echinoderms, of course, which are like starfish and sand dollars. And we get porphyra, which are like sponges. So we get this giant explosion of life 545 million years ago with these giant, like, freaky sea scorpions with these weird things. And all of this life is just it looks like nothing we have today. We come over here and we see more of that very obviously with these just like weird things that if you found them on Mars, it would only make sense. They're just very weird creatures in this time. Evolution is just playing with whatever it wants to. It's making things all squiggly and weird. And this is actually stromalite, which is very important because this is one of the oldest fossils we know of. These are reef builders. They'll build up in an area and they would build this massive, huge plume, and they would get compacted down by muds and sands and things like that, and then they eventually hardened and turned into fossils, but they would build a firm sediment for things to actually come up on. We start to see these first living cells. This is actually 3.5 billion years, so I actually went backwards in this exhibit. But you get it. So we get the origins of life. This is very complicated and a huge debate with abiogenesis. It's very, very confusing on where all of this comes from. DNA is first appearing, but then it goes, you get the living cells, and you get the explosion of life 545 million years ago. So this is billions and billions of years ago. And then we go to there, we eventually get the trilobites. I actually did this whole exhibit backwards. Then we get the beginning of the Earth 4.5 billion years ago, when just masses of rock and things kind of collided. And we actually thought that, we think right now, if I'm not mistaken, one of the major places we get water from was from like icy asteroids. They would land on Earth and crash down. But this is what our ancient seafloors would have looked like during those very early ages, where it's just so weird, just kind of looking like plants here. You get some weird little blob things. You get some shelled creatures, a kind of shelled creatures. They're not exactly shells. Mossonite spriggy. It's just this very weird display of just all of this stuff. So to just recap this, you get these weird early life creatures. We have the Earth first getting created. Then we have the first DNA and single-celled organisms. You get DNA that kind of appears, and you get single-celled organisms. Then they slowly group together into what's known as stromalite, which is that first organic thing that we find. And then you get these weird tube things and flat biscuit things. They're really weird. Then we come over here to the Devonian and early Cambrian is the main one. It's the Cambrian explosion. And you just get all of this diverse life just explodes with sea scorpions and echinoderms, mollusks, worms. Then we get the survivors of the Cambrian into the Devonian, and later with the trilobites, these weird sea cockroach things. And they're kind of they were at a dying time for their time, and eventually they disappeared long before the dinosaurs. But this is the early stages of what Earth life was like, and it's so interesting. So then we come to this exhibit. After all that life explodes and diversifies, this is what the diversity of the sea would have looked like. You start to see these sea lilies. Those appear, crinoids as we like to call them. You get to see some trilobites and nautiloids and nautilus. Those appear. You get those early cephalopods. You get those very long long-shelled cephalopods that are like squids, that look like squids today. It's very diverse. You see a lot of those sponges and corals. Those things they diversify and just spread across the ocean, widespread into reefs. You see brachiopods. Those appear. Those are like shells with clams and mussels and mollusks and things. Mollusks appear. So you get this very huge diversity of life from the ocean, and it only keeps diversifying from here. So as we go on from the sea lily reef, again, here we have more evidence of these sea lily reefs, where you see the actual crinoids. Here you see the cephalopods and trilobites are all embedded there, and you'll see them spread out. And sea lilies are very interesting because you'll find them clumped together in these massive, what we call sea lily gardens. So you get these massive sea lily gardens, and they'll be all together, and you'll see this just giant collection of sea lilies that'll be together. Then you get more of that diversity of life on the ocean with fish. Those start to appear heavily. In open waters, you get more open fish. You get crabs, things like that. You get these really weird diversity of fish in the ocean. And as we keep going here, everything just gets really big, really weird. Fish are just becoming widespread and abundant. But over here, this is what I was talking about. You have these sea lily gardens. This is a good example of a sea lily garden where it's multiple. It's very tiny. It's a very tiny sea lily garden. But they're in a group here, meaning that they would have lived together. Here you have these good trilobites, brachiopods like clams and things like that. You'll see this massive cephalopod. That would have been a giant squid. And then here, one of my favorite creatures from this time period would have been the sea scorpions. They're not actually scorpions, but they would be arthropods, if I'm not mistaken. These are Euryptids. They lived together. They were apex predators. They would hunt and grab little trilobites and crush them and eat what is inside. They're called sea scorpions because they look like they have those giant pincers and a giant stinger on their tail, hence the name sea scorpion. And then here we get this diversity of trilobites here. So you get all these different kinds of trilobites. Trilobites came in all different shapes and sizes. They'd have weird spoons on their face for digging or possibly attracting a mate. They'd get weird eyes that come out. You get these big bulbous head ones with this giant bulb on their head. Those were actually predators and carnivorous, which is very interesting. You get them with these crazy spikes here and there. Here we move on to brachiopods, which actually aren't extinct today. So, I mean, they existed throughout all of time. So they're a beautiful example of just living fossils. And you see how their shells develop. They have all kinds of different crazy versions of themselves with those four or five major family groups there that kind of break off. Then we move on to here where we get to that fish like we were talking about. So you have these very early jawless fish. They would scrape their face against the mud and pick up dirt and eat microorganisms in the dirt. Then we get the first true fish here, where they get that spine, they get those scales, they kind of get that jaw. The jaw was actually thought to come from a level of gill, which is interesting. It was part of the gill that descended down and created a jaw and opened up into its mouth. So we come here with those big old fish, and then eventually we'll get to actual vertebrates. We have this first fish here where it's that jaw. It's got that jaw, it's got the scales, it's got the fins, all of that. And then that's a modern fish right there. But if we come here, we have Dunkleosteus, the apex, one of the giant water apex predators of its time. These things single-handedly rivaled sharks because dolphins and orcas and things like that didn't exist. These things don't actually have teeth. These are not teeth. It's very interesting. So these are actually parts of its skull that would have been exposed and would have been serrated. So this thing wouldn't shed these teeth or anything. And this specific family of fish at its time were known for these giant, hard, like just actual bony-like structures on their face, while the rest was cartilage. If we come here with this beautiful Dunkleosteus, you'll see sharks. Now, sharks are very interesting because their teeth are actually evolved versions of scales, where the scales have this enamel on it, just like the teeth. And eventually, in the jaw, close to the jaw, the scales would evolve into being this tooth-like structure, so that you get this true teeth. You get the first actual teeth. And you have these very beautiful shark specimen here, this shark spine there. You have this giant shark tooth. You have that spine there. You have this weird rough shark skin. It's because, again, those scales had enamel on them to protect the shark, but then that enamel later turned into teeth, and then you get the first actual teeth. Now, if we follow this along here, we get the rock layers, we get things coming onto land, you get things like that, where you get the first plant fossils and things like that coming onto land. And then here, it seems like we got creatures first coming onto land, so dinosaurs aren't there yet. We got a whole thing, we got so much time between things first getting onto land and dinosaurs. But you'll see trackways, that's actually from Dinosaur Ridge. Beautiful, because we were just there. Got dinosaur skin, petrified jaw fossils, petrified bone right here, and you start to get plants and things like that that appear, and you get bugs, and that looks like an ammonite right there. So we're starting to get into the land part of this exhibit. So this is where they come out of the water. So you get those sea scorpions, and you get some really weird creatures. You have actual scorpions right there. Where they start to come up, you get lungfish. They appear and they start to inch their way onto land. You get insects get onto land. Insects rule the land thoroughly through this time, through a lot of the early ages. But you get these really weird lungfish that just pull in, load fin fish, which are what we turn into, which we come from. They pull themselves on the land and slowly evolve to come onto land more and survive on land. So now we come to the Permian era, where we have the weird amphibians first appear. This one is a beautiful amphibian. I've seen this particular specimen so much whenever you look up this specific animal. They have these weird boomerang-like heads. It could have been for digging or just for being more aerodynamic in the water. They have these just really weird build. So if we come here, we have this beautiful Dimetrodon fighting another early ancestor of an early creature. These are not dinosaurs, though. And one of the major dead giveaways that they're not dinosaurs is that their legs are not directly under their hips. So if you look at the back legs of these creatures, their legs are poking out like modern alligators, hence why they're not dinosaurs. These are actually closer related to mammals. We actually would have derived from these. Mammals, these eventually turned into mammals, and then eventually turned into dinosaurs too. But this is a very beautiful display showing off these two amazing specimens. If we come over here, we get a lot of these early plants. They had some really strange plants. Grasses weren't a thing, flowers weren't a thing, angiosperms weren't a thing. So you have these weird giant fern tree things. It's lycopods. They're just so interesting. But then we get the first eggs. We get reptile eggs evolve around this part. So you get the first reptilian-like creatures. You get the first seeds appear here too. So you have eggs and seeds appearing in this time period. This is Lystrosaurus. Well, that's not a Lystrosaurus. That's a Allopelodon, but it's similar and close to Lystrosaurus, which would have been one of our ancestors back then, from back in that time. This is a beautiful skull right here of this amazing creature right there. You have mammals first appearing with little possum things. This is a really cool amphibian versus reptile. It's really hard to discern between these two sometimes because they have such weird features, and a lot of it does come down to environment. You had giant insects in this time. That was a thing, like giant dragonflies, giant dragonflies like Meganura here. And then we come over here with just more massive plants. You start to get the first other type of things here. You get weird amphibians, giant fireflies, and proto-reptiles and things like that. And it's just this very weird hodgepodge time right before the dinosaurs. So here we come down into the time of the dinosaurs. And first, right off the bat, we have, in my opinion, some of the most underrated, underutilized in media dinosaurs. The bony-headed Pachycephalosaurus. These are specifically stygimolochs. And if you get close here, you can see this really cool Triceratops skull right off to the side here, and it looks like the skin is decaying off it. This is a beautiful display showing what would be the Cretaceous period right here, and I can't wait to go deeper into the time of the dinosaurs. Here you have another hard-headed stygimoloch here, and another turtle shell, a beautiful turtle shell here. Here we actually have some of the muscle and skin attachment of a dinosaur, which I think is a really cool display and a really cool exhibit here. So here we have the Coelophysis, and I just realized that there's no glass here, and that's just tripping with my mind. This is one of the first and earliest dinosaurs that we see where it starts to come and become bipedal. They get that really cool snake-like neck. So they have the gastroliths down there, or not the gastroliths, I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's the underside, the under rib there. They have that cool under rib, so you start to see that. These are some of the earliest dinosaurs of their time, and if you see this really cool art display here, they lived in a time where a lot of large dinosaurs weren't really a thing. They lived with crocs and croc-like relatives. They're not even massive, they're tiny. These little tiny creatures would have probably also been pack hunters, and they were the revolutionaries of becoming bipedal and having your hips under their legs. And during the Permian mass extinction, that was one of the key features that helped them survive. So that's why dinosaurs became so widespread and this massive innovation. So this is a beautiful exhibit on wings and wing evolution. Wings are actually very convergent, except for reptiles to birds. This is actually very interesting because pterosaurs and birds are two separate things, but wings were technically in dinosaurs along with pterosaurs. So technically, the archosaur through theropod lineage to birds is where we get the famous bird wing evolution. But pterosaurs also had web membranes that they would use between their fourth digit that would have been extended, so they wouldn't have a pinky, but they wouldn't really have a thumb either. So it would be more like this, and their pinky would be really elongated, and they would have a web membrane down to basically their hips, and it would go out. So that's how they would have fly. Insects are very weird. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what their wings are made of. But then, of course, we get all the way back here with bats. Bats are the modern mammal convergent evolution of wings. They also have the web membrane, similar to pterosaurs, but they have more than just one elongated digit. They have, all of them are elongated, and the membrane is between them. So that's how they fly. And this is a beautiful Archaeopteryx, which is highly debated if it's actually a dinosaur or the first bird. But in my opinion, these are Paravian dinosaurs. They are not exactly flyers. This thing couldn't fly. It didn't have powered flight, but they could soar from tree to tree. In Germany, they were discovered in Germany, along with Compsognathus, which is another little small creature in the Jurassic. This is a Rhamphorhynchon, I think is what they're called, Rhamphorhynchid, pterosaur, which is, they're not dinosaurs, they're a different lineage of archosaurs. So you'd have dinosaurs, they break off, but then off here before it, it was an offshoot into pterosaurs, which is these. These would have been the flyers in the Mesozoic period. This is the display that I am so happy that I'm getting to see in person again, much older, getting to record it. This is the Allosaurus and Stegosaurus display. We have the gular osteoderms of the Stegosaurs. We have baby Stegosaurs. We have this beautiful Allosaurus, I want to say fragilis here, which was the main one of the Mesozoic, but the Jurassic, and they're locked in combat. Allosaurus would have been a genuine predator of Stegosaurus. And I am just so happy that I'm able to actually see this exhibit again and talk about it and show it to you. This is a just beautiful representation of a Jurassic clash, and I'm just so happy that this is a thing that I can show y'all. This here is a beautiful Allosaurus specimen. It looks like there's some damage. I don't know if that's natural or not. Allosaurus comes from the lineage of Carnosaurs and later turns into the Carcharodontosaurs like Giganotosaurus, Acrocanthosaurus, and Carcharodontosaurus itself. But these first appeared in the Jurassic. They make up 70% of the theropods in the Jurassic period. So these things were very, very successful. And even after the Jurassic, when Allosaurus itself disappeared, its lineage was still very successful. Like I mentioned with Acrocanthosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, those kinds of things. They kind of disappeared in North America, primarily due to the introductions of Tyrannosaurs, but their jaws and their skulls were so unique because they didn't have a powerful bite force like Tyrannosaurus or like Torvosaurus of its time. They weren't bruisers, they were slashers. So their teeth would have meant for shearing. So they would have sheared away on the side of the ankylosaurs. Now, if y'all have watched the Dinosaur Ridge episode, I mentioned that they have these very unique claws here. Their claws were very hooked, surprisingly hooked. And it's still really up to question what the claws were used for. If they were actually meant for grappling and grasping something, or if they were just meant for just puncturing and tearing. So this is just a beautiful Allosaurus specimen, and it's just very beautiful. Here we have this beautiful stegosaur. This is the beautiful stegosaur display with these huge plates, these huge dorsal plates that stick off their back. It's debated if they were for thermal regulation. They had in fossils you would actually see blood streams, well, not physical blood, but you'd see parts where the blood streams would have been in the dorsal plates, indicating that they could have pushed blood into their dorsal plates to possibly scare off predators or deter predators or even attract a mate. And this is a beautiful display because it has this baby stegosaurus here, protected from an allosaur, so it actually shows character of like this motherly protection of its young, but also of like actual rivalry between these two creatures. If we come over here, one of the interesting things about Stegosaurus is these gular osteoderms that protected its neck. They're osteoderms on the neck that would protect from bites against the neck. So on the top you have these spiky plates, but on the bottom you have these hard osteoderms, so something can't just clamp around its neck and bite through it. This is a very beautiful display of this just majestic, unique creature. So here we have another large sauropod, Apatosaurus. We had and I'll show you later in this video, along with possibly a separate video, of the world's largest dinosaurs exhibit. But this is the beautiful Apatosaurus. They also have the gastralia, that's what it's called. Like Carnosaurs like Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurs like T-Rex. So there's this massive Goliath creature with this long bullwhip-like tail. This amazing, beautiful creature. Just looking at the sheer size of this thing. These things were just like the generalist, just the generalist herbivores of their time. And they were massive, so they weren't, when they were full grown, they weren't ever really picked on by individual allosaurs. But I full-heartedly think a group of allosaurs would have attacked an Apatosaurus or two. And if we get up close here, we have Gargoylosaurus, which is an ankylosaurid, and could withstand attacks from Allosaurus because of these giant bony plates on their back. So those bony plates would have acted like armor, and they were similarly related to Stegosaurs. They were a different lineage, but they're directly connected through, I want to call it eopods, if I'm not mistaken. But these were the early ankylosaurs during the Jurassic period, 145 million years ago. Now, if I could show the backdrop of of just dinosaur genera, this would be it. The king of the dinosaurs, the hadrosaurs, with their dental battery, the king having its giant, robust teeth meant for clamping and bone crushing. You have Pachycephalosaurus, I want to say probably Wyomingus. This could either be giraffe type of Brachiosaurus. This says it's Brachiosaurus. I can see that. These were Macronaria. Their nose would have been up here. They have this giant shearing teeth. They have this giant eye socket here. Here we have the Thagomizers of Stegosaurs, which are these giant long spikes at the end of their tail meant for piercing. And then we have the Ankylosaurs, where this is actually Euoplocephalus. This is the club tail, Euoplocephalus club tail. Similar to the Thagomizer, think of the Thagomizer like an axe or a spear or four spears. More like a scythe is probably a better comparison, where it would cut or stab or poke in or cut through. This is a warhammer. This would be your warhammer of the creatures. It would just smash it to the side and shatter ribs, shatter bone. The amount of force a Euoplocephalus or an Ankylosaur could get behind their tail swing would be enough to basically just shatter straight through the leg bone of a Tyrannosaur. If we come over here, we have that Allosaurus arm with the hand, the claws, the ulna, the radius, the humerus. Then you have the scapula, the shoulder would be going up. Beautiful display here. Here we have this is a Stegosaurus leg, where you can see it's very flat on the bottom. They have those very weird, robust front toes. Now that's actually part of the speculative paper that I want to write, and then you can figure out how to get through that and get to that. But I figured that Stegosaurus, since their front legs were so much shorter than their back legs, they would be able to rear up, and during mating, two bulls would go against each other, and instead of using the Thagomizer as just hitting each other and stabbing each other, unlike Ankylosaurs where they have that bony tail so they could hit each other, they would rear up and wrestle with those front legs and use those giant toes and just hit against the sides of the ribs, trying to knock each other over until a Stegosaurus falls over. One falls over, and then the other one left standing would be the victor. And here we have a duck-billed dinosaur foot. You see it's so much different. They have such much more elongated toes here. It's a lot more thin. This is a front limb, of course, because you have the scapula there. You have a scapula here too. So these are all front limbs. Just meant for basically pulling up. One thing we know about duckbills is that they could rear. They could definitely go onto their back legs and bring their front legs up, whether it's for speed or running. But that's why their front limbs are so much thinner. And I find that interesting that, Stegosaurus are similar in that stance. So here we have the Triceratops horridus. The other species is Perorsis. And one of the go-to, there's many ways you can tell them apart. There's a lot of differences. Not really. One of the go-to ways is this giant brow horn, the direction that it is bent. Horridus, if you look at it, it's just like that. Just an arch down. Perorsis, it comes up and it would dip a little bit before it comes back up. So that's a really easy way to tell them apart if they're on display next to each other. This is a beautiful Triceratops horridus skull. I'll half of one. But up here, we have a massive duckbill. The reason they're called duckbills, surprise, surprise, they have duckbills. They have similar duckbills. They have these very interesting, unique tails amongst anything. This specific one is Myosaurus, meaning a good mother. This is the same species that's on display at the SC State Museum, which is very interesting. And again, they have those huge, robust back limbs that can support all of their weight, and they can bring their front limbs up and run for speed. Now, one thing about Myosaurus that we know is it was discovered tending to their young. So we have that baby Myosaurus over there, and its name literally means the good parent or good mother. And this is just a beautiful display of one. And if we come over to the head here, they have something very interesting to duck-billed dinosaurs and ceratopsians. They have what's called a dental battle. If you look at those back jaws, all of their teeth are just pressed together so firmly that it acts as just shears that just grind away and they can chew. So they would grab those ferns, they would shear them with their teeth, pick them up, and chew on them with that dental battle. And this duckbill could have been for many things. It could have actually been for aquatic plants. It could have been a slightly adapted for more aquatic plants, having lived in the Hell Creek Formation where there would have been swamps. But this is a beautiful Myosaur that have the I think it's the Oliskier ring or Olisco ring, one of those. Cut that out. But it's amazing, massive, robust skull, massive, robust body, forelimbs. They're surprisingly thin. I keep bringing this up. It's surprising because they can lift them up. Probably not permanently, and they need to put them back down eventually. But they have it kind of up here. And of course, they have the ornithischian style of hip that goes back. The pubis, I want to call it, goes back. So you have, that's a good way of determining it. It's the Saurischian and the ornithischian. These are ornithischians, same as the Stegosaurus. The Apatosaurus, on the other hand, has that Saurischian hip where it's bulb and then it has the two major sections. Saurischian goes forward and back really sharply and it's very rounded. This is Othnelia, another Jurassic dinosaur that we know from footprints, fossils, and even, if this is what I think it is, a egg bed of eggs. They were tiny ornithopods of their time, of the Jurassic, that would have been easy prey for allosaurs, torvosaurs, and ceratosaurs. And this is just like a nice little pack group of them, and I find that really cool. And I love that it's in this display with all of the other Jurassic things. So here we have large aquatic reptiles. You have that beautiful mosasaur that seen up top. You have these giant fish here down at the bottom. You have these multiple different types of fish. Here we have this beautiful prehistoric turtle here. The interesting about turtles is they're not synapse, which means they have one hole. They're diaps, they just lost their hole, they have extra hole in their skull, which is very interesting. We have ichthyosaurs, which ruled the world from the ocean in the Jurassic. And they actually, surprisingly, took on a dolphin. They were like prehistoric dolphins. This giant bulldog fish here. They were very vicious. Look at those massive teeth right there. And that mosasaur, which would have ruled the oceans. And if we come over here, come around here and look up, we have pterosaurs. Pterosaurs are beautiful. They have that, again, elongated fourth finger digit, as I mentioned earlier, that would have been elongated with that web membrane that would have connected. This one has a crest, so I'm assuming that one's probably a male, and that one has a smaller crest, so I'm assuming that one's a female. And the crest is a good way of sexual dimorphism to tell apart males and females. Now if we come over here, we actually have plants. The Cretaceous is when the first flowering plants appear. You get angiosperms and flowering plants, and you get these beautiful flowers that first appear in this time. Here we have Nautilus. Get up close to this. I want these suture patterns to be shown. These are beautiful, very ornate suture patterns. Look at those very ones. These are still not the most evolved suture patterns. That's like second to most evolved. And then in this display right next to it, we have other cephalopods. So you have a lot of nautiloids, a lot of cephalopods, a lot of nautiloids, but then you have the large cephalopods here. But above that is actually, if I'm not mistaken, probably a bentonite, if I'm not mistaken. You can tell because it has those very ornate suture patterns. So those are actually nautiloids that shells are not coiled up. And if we come over here, you have a crinoid garden, another crinoid garden with some more spirally, really weird cephalopod shells there. But you have this massive garden of crinoids again. We have crabs, we have lobsters. So yes, if you go back to the Jurassic, or 70 million years ago, that would have been the Cretaceous actually, you could eat lobster in this massive clamshell. Look how that's my hand compared to it for perspective. This thing is absolutely massive. And if we come over here, we get more ammonites, more nautilus. 10 million years of ammonites. If you get up close there, that middle one right there is a beautiful example of that super advanced suture pattern. If we zoom in on that one, you have that beautiful, ornate, just spiky suture pattern that appears. So we get these nautiloids with these different suture patterns that appear throughout time that slowly become more complicated. It could have been for buoyancy and articulation, possibly picking up mates with a more ornate pattern. But one of the beautiful things about nautiloids and Nautilus itself is it's actually still alive today. So now we get to the asteroid collides, wipes the dinosaurs out. You get that nice ash layer around the world that tells you that the Mesozoic has come to the end, and we come to the Cenozoic with, this is specifically marsupials in the Rockies. These are early primates. Actually, they're not marsupials, they're primates. Like monkeys here. In the Cenozoic. So we come around here, we start to get evidence of rainforest treetops here. So you get this big leaves, and you get this weird hippo. This is actually a hippo species lower jaw that existed probably here in Colorado. DMNH would be Dinosaur National Monument, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I think that's formation. So that would have been the formation. But we did have hippo relatives here in North America. So we start to get the rise of mammals, with mammals taking up the niches of dinosaurs. Since dinosaurs existed and took up all of the niches, and now they're dead, all of those niches are open. This gave mammals the chance to rise up. And then you get these other really weird, not marsupial, I keep wanting to call them marsupials. They are primates, so you get these really weird primates that start to evolve. And you get that thumb and they can grasp. And you get primates here. So then if we come around here, but the real thing is, dinosaurs did not go fully extinct. They turned into avian creatures, and not an avian dinosaurs. But they tried to have a rise with the big pterosaurs. These things had this massive killer beak that they would use to peck into things or bash things open. They'd have those giant claws on their feet to just slash things with. One of the main hunting for carnivorous ones, they would run up beside prey and peck at them with their beak. And if we turn around here, I'll get into the rest of that. We have more beautiful fish fossils because we get a lot of those in Colorado and Wyoming. Fish fossils, you got the stingrays there. We have a beautiful, very beautiful gar specimen right here. That is a full gar fish with their very unique scale types. You have other fish. Then we get fish deathbeds, where a bunch of fish would die from a dried out river or creek or something crazy. We get turtles and crocodiles. Those appear, and if we turn around here, we get, well, first off, let's say hey to this little turtle down here. We get land turtles and tortoises start to appear. Then we get these really weird, just Tyrannosaurus right here, of this massive, just mammal here, because I can't. This is a rhino-like. This has got a horse-like body, so it's probably closely related to a horse, with a rhino-like head. With this one, also give a good indication of that. The difference between rhinos and these things is, rhinos' horns are not actually part of their skeleton. It's made of keratin, or it's like a hair-like structure. It's very interesting. But these are actually closely related to horses, and you can tell them it's not a rhino because the horn thing is not actually part of its, or is part of its skull. This is a Dinosaurus. You probably see both these creatures in the Ice Age movies on my long head. This is a, like I said, Tyrannosaurus, common across North America, just looks like a generic prey mammal. And if we come over here, we get palm trees. We get the first palm trees. You get fossil palms from 50 million years ago. You get the giant spiky stretches of palm trees pop out. Very unique tree structure. We have a beautiful palm fronds right here, the palm fans right here. This is a good indication of a palm tree. 50 million years ago, this leaf fell off a palm tree and sank to the bottom of a Wyoming lake. Take a close look. Ancient insects and insect damage are preserved on it, which is a beautiful indication. You can see all along it where insects would have been burrowing into it, or not burrowing into it, because there's not much to burrow into, but eating it or consuming it or just using it for whatever. So this is actually a beautiful indication of what kind of ecosystem it would have. These palm trees only exist in specific ecosystems. Here, we have another fish, we have some more corals, we have some more leaves, but I know y'all want to talk about these. We have, what do they call it? Pig bears, bear pigs. These are massive pigs. This is where we get the first like pig-like structures. This one is a Archaeothermus mortis. This is a Oreodont, if I'm not mistaken. So they're feral pigs. Not really feral, but they are pigs. They have this giant sagittal crest on the back of their skull. That would be for more muscle attachment of the jaw to give them a stronger jaw. Because these pigs were actually carnivorous. Then we get more into a lot of these horse relatives, surprisingly. I know they look like rhinos, but they're not rhinos because the horns are actually part of the skull. This is a Megarops. These are Megaropses, which are very beautiful with these giant ornate bulbs. That would have been used for defense, similar to the method of rhinos, where they probably use them for ramming or possibly knocking up roots and things like that they would eat. These are herbivores. Down here, I think, is actually where hyenodons. No, these are hyenas. This is a hyenodon. These are Maracinodons. These little tiny weasel, little scoundrel creatures that totally would have been the little like raptor-like creature if they made a Jurassic Park, but for mammals. And then here we have again another rhino. Actually, I think this one is a rhino. I think this is a rhino, and that's very surprising. It's lacking that horn, but you can see where that horn would start to appear. Rhinos don't live in the United States today, but many different kinds used to thrive around the world. This species of Trigonius, very confusing. Latin is not my native language, obviously. But this is what rhinos in the North America would have come from. And then eventually rhinos, these things all go extinct in North America and we get new species that appear. Here we have two Canis dirus, which is dire wolves. These are both dire wolves. They're both wolves, but not the same species. The large skull is Canis dirus, the long extinct dire wolf. The smaller one is Canis lupus, the modern wolf. So this top one is Canis lupus, which is modern wolves, and the bottom one is Canis dirus, which is dire wolf. And you can tell that they have they're closely related through some kind of lineage based on skull structure there. But here we have all kinds of early creatures. You get primitive bats, you have early rodents, you have early primates, you even have early armadillos, and again, primates, in insectivores, things that only eat insects. Then you get saber-toothed cats here. You get other deer-like creatures here. We have early browsers. You can tell they're browsers by the type of tooth they have. It's a lot to do with the shape where like mastodon and mammoths, they eat two separate things. Mammoths are grazers because they would have grasses around. Mastodons were not because they eat tree bark, surprisingly, and things like that. We'll go into that later. You have early mammals. We have carnivores here. You have this is where tooth diversity really explodes. Carnivorous mammals get a special feature in their teeth where all of them become sharper and more pointed because they need to tear and eat meat. So that's a good indicator right there. That is a good Smilodon, or not Smilodon, but saber-toothed cat that is specifically Dinotistus, and then you start to see that saber-tooth like situation where the canines actually elongate for specific piercing structures. Here we have the pig-like entelodons, where they're very carnivorous. You can tell by their teeth. These things are very weird. They're giant, basically pigs, but not directly related to pigs. But these things are massive. Imagine this thing running out of the woods at you instead of like a normal. Over here we have some gazelle camels, which is actually very interesting because we used to have camel relatives in North America before they went extinct. So this is what those camel relatives would have looked like. This one right here, we have a Colicotherium. They have they have very long front legs, which is very interesting. They have clawed feet like sloths, if you look down there at their feet. They had the body of a rhino. It's very robust and big, but the face of a horse. These things are very, very weirdly put together. And honestly, from those descriptions, it would sound like somebody just put a bunch of hodgepodge of creatures together. And here we have that pig-like thing again. It's got giant pig-like thing that was preying on a lot of this stuff. If we come over here, we have Oreodonts. We have Oreodonts right here. If you get a little closer here, you see these Oreodonts a little better. These were also carnivorous. You can tell by their teeth, and they have them feeding on this bone pile. And then here they have Stenomyolisis, which was a Miocene early modern camel ancestor. So these things are actually related to camels. And if we come over here, this is just a beautiful bone bed of just scattered bones of what that would look like. But this is actually your first rhinos, like rhinos with horns, I'll say, because you did have early rhinos. But this is your first horned rhino. Well, not your first one, but this is what those early horned rhinos would see. And as you can see, the skull here, you have the actual skull, but then the horn isn't actually part of the skull. So that's a good indicator of why it's rhino-like. Now, if we turn around here, we get the mammoth elephant relatives. This one is specifically Gomphitherium, which has that really weird elongated lower jaw. The jaw structure suggests that this uses jaws like pincers to grasp or break branches to get to leaves. So it would use its trunk, wrap around a branch, and shove it between possibly their tusks in the lower jaw and break the branch off, and possibly get some of the bark or some of the leaves off. Here we have a little, this is an official tortoise. You're saying this is a tortoise? Yes, we have official tortoises now, land turbals, because that's what tortoises really are. So we have this nice little land tortoise here. We have Synthrocerus, slingshot tri-horn animal. Looks like nothing you'd see today. It was related to both modern pigs and camels. This was a connector of pigs and camels. And then here we have Tyrannosaurus, a hippo-shaped North American rhinoceros. Was a grazer. Again, you can tell by the tooth structure. It might have been semi-aquatic, eating grass on land at night. And cooling down in the water by day. Here we have modern horses. So here we have the modern horse, which is, you should be somewhat familiar with. You have the hooves and things like that. But they actually went through a long process of evolving themselves. Where you eventually, to start out, you have these three-toed horses. And it's actually interesting, and I mentioned earlier, that horses survived through the growing of their crowns, of their molar tooth crowns. That is because these early ones didn't have as tough of things to eat on the landscape. But as you go along, the plants get tougher. You get not necessarily wheat, but tougher plants. If you've ever been in like the grasslands of Colorado or Wyoming, you'll see that grass is very tough. So we get these more modern wild horses, where the crown extended to be worn down, so that it could be worn down. So by the time the animal is dead, they still had some crown left so they could eat. And eventually, we get into modern horses that were brought over by Europeans back to the New World. When these horses went extinct, horses died off from North America into the Spanish conquistadors brought modern horses over. So I guess you could have an entire debate if you release those horses and they became wild horses, because we did get wild horses again. Are they technically an invasive species because horses existed in North America? So here we have whale evolution, where whales actually started out on land as these weird-legged creatures, and as they go back into the ocean. Some get sharper teeth like Rhodicus or Rhodectus, and you have those early, not horses, but whales, where they were on land. They slowly grow back into flippers. Their feet kind of shrink and they turn better into fins, until you get into modern whales with you have Basilosaurus there, which is not teeth for some reason. I think that's actually Basilosaurus. So then you have that baleen whale, where it feeds krill in through the baleen to filter that krill out of the water to feed it. Then we get modern toothed whales like sperm whale, and hence the name toothed whale. It has individual teeth, and they are carnivorous and predators. Here we have a woolly mammoth, not necessarily mammoth skull. They have these giant, robust, curved tusks. And this is what I was talking about. You have the mastodon teeth and the mammoth teeth. Mammoth teeth have this very specific shape to it, and and based on this shape, you can tell that it was in the open grasslands and it was a grazier. It would have eaten grasses and things like that. Well, the mastodon tooth has these more robust, chunky parts that come out, and that's because they lived in wooded areas with lots of leaves and tender branches, fewer ridges, useful for tearing leaves and branches apart, because mastodons actually eat bark too. But this is a beautiful mammoth skull. You can see there's a giant slit right in the front, with a giant hole here. You can actually see some of this teeth back there. It's crazy. Once fossils are excavated from the field, they are brought back to what's called a prep lab, where they are taken out of the jackets. And this right here is a sauropod. It's part of the end of the tail there, it looks like, and a little bit of the hip. So that's a sauropod right there. That's an awesome sauropod, just right there in the jacket that's being worked on. They take it out of the jacket, they clean the dirt off it, they would look at if there's any pathologies or things that they can research. They would file it, figure out organization, where it is, where it belongs in storage and things like that, or if they're going to put it on display to figure out how they do that. Right here we have a beautiful Allosaurus right here in the front here. This is a beautiful Allosaurus. Here we have this massive fin whale skeleton. These things are what rule the oceans today and are the giants of today. So I think this is oddly fitting, going in and coming out of the largest dinosaurs ever, of the largest dinosaurs exhibit, where we get to see some of the giants of today before you see the giants of ancient time. This is just massive aquatic creature, and they eat the smallest creatures with they would have these little like hair-like structures in their mouth that would funnel in krill so that they could eat it. This is just a beautiful, massive creature. This is the temporary exhibit of the world's largest dinosaurs, the sauropods. Now we're going to actually come through here. Look at that. That would have probably been an accurate size for some kind of sauropod. And on the ground here, we have the feet of these massive creatures. And then we're going to come through here to see these massive, just behemoths of their time. We got this beautiful tree. But here we have what appears to be a diplodocid of some kind, or diplodocoid of some kind. Actually, This is Argentinosaurus, which is the largest, speculatively, I still debate it with Patagotitan. This is one of the top 2 largest dinosaurs of ever. This is one of the largest things to walk on land, if not the largest thing to walk on land. This is a beautiful head recreation. You actually have if you can see the wall there, you have the body. So this is probably not necessarily accurate to the height. I would not be even remotely close to touching it. But as we come through here, we get this is just the leg bone, for the record, of, if I'm not mistaken, this is actually Supersaurus. This is a Supersaurus leg bone. I would be up to this thing's knee. That is a human. This is a human skeleton. This is an African elephant skull. So look how absolutely massive. This is Supersaurus too. This isn't even one of the largest sauropods. This is still a sauropod, not even a titanosaur. We got some freaky bugs here. And this really awesome, get a close up of that, get close to that, of this Komodo dragon. This is a really cool Komodo dragon. I've never actually seen a Komodo dragon skeleton. I've never actually thought about looking for one or looking at one. This is actually a really cool thing to see. So again, and back here on this wall, it might not come out in the camera, it might be difficult. You can actually see the size comparison of some of those really large creatures of today. But again, this is a Supersaurus. This is just the leg too. That is the craziest part. So this leg is taller and larger than literally anything here that's shown. It's larger than anything of today. So we come in here and we got this big behemoth there. If I'm not mistaken, this is supposed to be a Mamenchisaurus. These things are just enormous. This thing possibly is to scale. Look at that little head staring down at us. These things are absolutely massive, and they're not even the largest of the sauropods, which is the craziest part. So if we come over here, first thing we see is how much food they would have to eat. And this is what they probably would have been eating. Horsetails, monkey puzzle, ginkgo, conifers, ferns, cycads, broadleaf trees, and grasses is what Mamenchisaurus. And this is probably how much it had to eat in a day to sustain itself. Oh, look at that. That is a huge salad right there. I mean, that is just a lot of food for one animal. And over here, we have the amazing shoulder of the left and right shoulder, or scapula, if you want to call it that. It would be the part that kind of goes up and would form the shoulder of an Apatosaurus. These things are just massive. That is, like, look at your shoulder, just feel your shoulder, and look at that. I could probably lay down next to that and it's as large as me. These things are absolutely enormous, these massive scapulas. Then, if we're drifting over here, you'll see the difference of the skulls between what appears to be a horse of some kind, or an equus of some kind, where you have these very unique chewing motions, where you have the different types of teeth like molars, premolars, incisors, and canines. But sauropods, this diplodocus here, is very unique because they only have the incisor-like teeth. So their teeth are meant for shearing and pulling away hard ferns and trees and things like that, and ripping up these hard ferns and trees. So you have this very unique, just basically think about those just sharp teeth right in your mouth. They got a mouth full of those, and they're not even a carnivore. It's very interesting. But horses are interesting as well because they have that kind of connection in the back for chewing. Horses are very interesting because the reason why they evolved to have such long teeth and their crowns grew so long is actually because they needed to chew harder plants. So they would their teeth were getting worn away, so all the ones with smaller crowns went extinct. So all the ones that grew larger crowns stayed alive. And I mean, going back to this sauropod here, these teeth are just, they would be massive too. That tooth would probably be, this one is probably a smaller skull. This isn't necessarily to scale, but showing the difference between these teeth is a beautiful thing to do. Well, here we actually have the brain case of the sauropod, specifically Diplodocus or Diplodocus. These things had really tiny brain cells that didn't actually have a lot to them like modern mammals. So they really had the core. They had a massive growth section of their brain. They had just a barely little bit of vision right here would be the green part, and the yellow part would be light sensing, so they could sense light and things like that. And facial nerves. Did sauropods have trunks like elephants? People used to think so, but their brain case disproves this idea because they don't actually have they wouldn't have the brain capability of controlling that trunk then. So they probably, since they were so massive, the growth bulb got really big, so they kept getting bigger. But they didn't really need anything else because nothing would mess with them. Because nothing messes with a Goliath creature, full-grown sauropod. It was very rare for something to happen like that. So they have this very small brain case and this very tiny head. Because if their head was any bigger, their neck would be weighed down and they wouldn't be able to lift it well. So this is just a beautiful representation of the sauropod brain case.
Sauropods most likely owed their gigantic size not to one trait, but to a unique mix of many. They were a patchwork of evolutionary innovation.
This is a sauropod vertebra, particularly the neck vertebra. So you have this just massive thing. I mean, that's my hand compared to it. It's hard to get on camera, but like, it's not doing it justice. These things are massive, absolutely massive. Now, if you notice, they have these giant air pockets in their necks. That's actually where they were hollow and filled with air sacs. Inclusion of the air in the bones lightened the sauropod's neck by more than 50%. So these things actually had a lot of huge air pockets in them so that the sauropod could hold its neck up and it would have a lighter neck. And I mean, the weight reduction made holding and moving their necks possible. So it's not just this stiff, just like neck that they can't really move, they'd have to move their body with it. So if you get here, this is just a beautiful cast of a sauropod. You can see those are those air sacs. You'd see, if you look on this side, you'd have where it would connect to the other vertebrate, then you'd have where the nerve, the spinal cord would go through that hole there. And coming over here, we have it compared to a giraffe and a brachiosaurus. And then here we have which one weighs more. So giraffes giraffes don't have as long of necks, and the air pockets are smaller, if I'm not mistaken. The sauropods had surprisingly light bones than what it would actually think because of those air pockets that would have been in their neck. It would help support their neck up and keep it upright. So you get these giant bones with these giant air sacs in them that would support the neck weight, be able to support it and actually make the sauropod weigh less, surprisingly. This is an Apatosaurus vertebrate. Look at this, just massive size of this thing. You'll actually see some of those air pockets in there. This one has, just due to geology and it being buried for millions of years, has been crushed by the earth and disconformed and just kind of molded off, which makes it surprisingly difficult to actually know what it's supposed to truly look like. But through 3D reconstructions and things like that and kind of straightening it out, we can figure out what disconformities have broken it up or smushed it. And then we can look at others that have been smushed and disconformed less, and we can compare them so we can kind of straighten this one out. But this is just a beautiful Apatosaurus vertebrate. You can actually see all of the museum markings of which parts and where it was dug up and things like that. It's still in the plaster case. This thing is massive and beautiful. This is a reconstruction of the heart of a sauropod. These things are absolutely enormous. They had to have these huge hearts that would pump all of this blood throughout, especially up to their neck, up to their brain. So you have all of these just crazy, just massive, everything is just upscaled to an insane degree. It took giant, powerful hearts to pump the blood. I mean, think about an elephant. The average body weight of an elephant is about 6 tons. The average heart rate is about 55 pounds, and the resting heart rate is about 28. Compared to a human, where this one is specifically a male, the average body weight is 180 pounds. The heart is 11 ounces. The average human heart is about 11, well, the average male human heart is about 11 ounces. And the resting heart rate is about 72 beats per minute. Now imagine how much just more massive a sauropod heart would have to be. I mean, look at this just massive, I mean, this is like, this thing is, and the human heart is about, they say, the size of your fist. I mean, that's my fist compared to that here. These things are absolutely massive. If we come over here, we can actually see what would be their lungs. These massive, pillowy lungs with this massive cord to bring in oxygen. It would have to be just constantly sucking oxygen. And one of the beautiful things about dinosaurs is they have a bird-like respiratory system, not circulatory system. I'm sure they have a bird-like circulatory system as well. But their respiratory system was bird-like. So they had air pockets along the way so that even when the sauropod was exhaling, air would still be going down into the lungs, circulating, coming in, and being fed into the oxygen, being fed into the blood. While the sauropod exhaled, it still sucked air in. While it inhaled, obviously it sucked air in. But if we turn towards here, you can see some of these amazing sauropods. This massive one that you can't see, that if you follow this leg up, is an Argentinosaurus. This doesn't even fit in this building. We saw that at the Fernbank Natural History Museum. Then we even got some smaller sauropods that would be like my size. You have Europasaurus. This little. So you have these massive giants, these tinier, smaller ones. Then, building up, we have the famous Apatosaurus here from Denver. Came from, the first ones were found near Dinosaur Ridge. So you have this massive Apatosaurus. These giants would have been traveling in herds too. These things were just absolutely massive. And of course, we have one of my personal favorite sauropods. And it's very unique because their group has these cool neck fins, and it's debated whether it was just spikes or if they actually had a scent. This is Amargasaurus. Those are from South America. These massive things have these beautiful sails, and it's just a very beautiful display. So all of the models shown are 2% of the full size. Just letting that sink in. These things are tiny, but in comparison, look at this little tiny Europasaurus down here. Look at this itty bitty little guy. Then we come up to the Camarasaurus right here. Then you have the Mamenchisaurus. You have the Amargasaurus, Sauroposeidon, which is a very beautiful name, by the way. Apatosaurus right there in the middle, and then back there we have the Argentinosaurus reigning over all of them as this large, just Goliath of a creature. So these things really were interesting because they come in all sorts of different sizes. So, I mean, Europasaurus is very interesting because it lived on an island. So one thing about islands is that their ecosystems are very contained and very small. Meaning, if you're too big, you just destroy the ecosystem and everything dies. So what did Europasaurus have to do? It had to shrink into what's called island dwarfism. So Europasaurus actually got really small on these islands, which I think is very interesting that we actually have evidence of that like natural event today that happens. Like you have these, this is a good idea, the Virginia deer, then you have the key deer. They're pretty much the same, but one's just like here, the other one's here. They're right about there. But I mean, Europasaurus was just like that. It was still massive by animal standards, but like it was tiny by, it was itty bitty by sauropod standards. So you get this tiny island dwarfism to this massive open area that would be able to support an Argentinosaurus. And this is just a beautiful display showing the size and just the variety of these majestic creatures. This is an Apatosaurus femur. Apatosaurus being first discovered in Colorado here in Dinosaur Gulch. Get a little closer here, you can see a lot of the grooves and things on. Along with one thing interesting about sauropods is you'll actually see a strip of iron. It'll become oxidized iron. I don't really see any of that right here, but there have been femurs and legs and things like that discovered with strips of just like iron, oxidized iron. Now, what are those? The oxidized iron would be where the bloodstream is. It would have been where the veins of the beast were running up and down the legs and the bodies. And you'll find these little strips of iron, of oxidized iron, sometimes on sauropod bones, and you'd be able to discover where the blood was. And these massive creatures, and since they're so massive and they have so much blood when they do this, that's one reason why that preserves them so well. This is a beautiful Apatosaurus femur. Really cool thing depicting how these sauropods would move in this very cool kind of art interpretation way. Also, more evidence that you don't need to just be a scientist to be a paleontologist. You can make really cool art displays like this. But turning that back on, this is really cool. Get real close here. Get like real close, right up in there. When that light turns on, you'll see them moving, and you'll see how their bodies would have moved, how their tails would have kind of swayed back and forth, how their legs would have moved. These things are really cool. This is really cool and a really cool depiction of how they move. So one of the cool things about sauropods is we've actually discovered pigmentation of sauropods on their skin, if I'm not mistaken. We found their skin, so we were able to determine some pigmentation. So this is actually a really cool exhibit showing what they would have looked like camouflaged. Go out of focus there. So they have this sauropod here, and they have this really cool camera thing set up here. And then they would have whenever they would be breeding to attract a mate. So you get this, if you see, you have a lot more warm colors near the neck area there. You see a lot more warm, vibrant colors that would expose to kind of attract that mate versus the camouflage, which kind of holds the sauropod to keep it hidden a little bit. What they're exactly camouflaging from, I really don't know. This is like a walking building, so camouflage is a little weird in my opinion, but it is certainly an interesting thing. But, getting close to that face there, they would have definitely had some kind of version of bright, vibrant colors to attract a mate, most likely like modern birds. This is a Titanosaur osteoderm. Osteoderms are like the things on ankylosaurs, the big old bumpy bumps that they have that were like armor. Titanosaurs had those too. So not only were these massive Goliath creatures, they had armor as well. These things were like just medieval war creatures made for battle. It's really cool because it's just this hard chunk of bone that's just clumped up and just built up, and then now it's armored and heavy. This is just a beautiful thing that we're showing off here. So here we actually have eggs of all different types of creatures, from the small little hummingbird that is itty bitty with this tiny little egg here, to elephant birds, which have these massive eggs. Now, surprisingly, this specific sauropod had very surprisingly decent sized small eggs, but still very chunky for its size. It's very surprising how little sauropods started out. So if we actually come over here, we'll see this very cool representation of a sauropod nest with a sauropod hatchling right there. They would have clumped their eggs together, kind of like sea turtles, dug out a section, possibly buried them too. So you have this just giant cluster of these giant eggs that eventually hatch into baby sauropods. Now this exhibit is really cool. I'm gonna go through this really slow, but this is the giant ending portion of a diplodocus tail, or a diplodocus, of the caudal vertebrae. So if you're it goes and it goes and it goes, and you get these very, very thin, a lot more thin sections. So you get this last little bulb here. But what you're seeing is only that much of the tail of this massive beast. And just look at this. Look at this massive section of tail. But it's only that much. These things are just massive. These things are huge. I'm at a loss for words. And you see how tiny it gets. They get bigger. This section would have gotten bigger into the other parts of their tail. These things are just absolutely massive behemoths. This is beautiful imagery of a dinosaur quarry. Now, these things are very interesting. You have the skull here, you have this thigh bone here, you have this vertebrae. It's a bunch of different specimens just clustered up in one. But what does this mean? How did this happen? It could have been any number of things. It could have been a flash flood. They could have died in a river and been washed down in a bunch just constantly over time. But it's just this massive just field of just bones that they would excavate and discover this giant bone field. And it's amazing. You look at these bones and they look tiny in that image, but it would be like this. This is an Apatosaurus rib. Look how massive this thing is. You would get like 100 of these just buried up on top of each other from like 14 different specimens just cluttered up there. Just this massive bone here. And this is a rib bone. These some of the smaller bones are still as massive as some of the large bones of modern creatures. And if we come over here, this is a Diplodocus or Diplodocus femur. Again, we have another just massive, huge leg chunk here. You can see some of the wear and tear of just nature. You can see how they plastered some of the pieces on there a little bit. You'll see some of the replacement of whenever the groundwater would seep into the fossil and it would make it mineralized, and so you get this giant mineralized thing. So as we go through this history, we get the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. In 1915, they discovered this bone bed. They started digging stuff up. They do a lot of research on it. You get this massive sauropod reconstruction. And eventually, we get to the 2000s. In Tanzania is a giant one for a giant sauropod hotbed with just giant sauropod clusters. So you get these massive behemoths traveling in packs. Now, this is a Diplodocus or Diplodocus pelvis, which would be one of the parts of the hip bone. Look at this massive thing. This would be part of the hip of this thing. These things are just massive. I mean, I can't even properly compare. Try to get an overhead shot of that. I think that'd be a cool overhead shot. But just this massive femur for these massive column-like legs. I mean, just look how absolutely massive that is. Now, to put it into perspective, this is a vertebrae of a sauropod. Does this say what kind? So this is Argentinosaurus. This is an Argentinosaurus vertebrae. Look how massive. This thing is almost as tall as tall. I think I'm ever so slightly taller by like a couple of inches. And that's probably the hat too. But Amphicoleus. This is an Amphicoleus. I think this is a speculative one. I don't think we actually have a real one to match up there. But look how much larger that is. That speculation of that creature. Of that creature is to what we really have, Argentinosaurus. I mean, this thing is absolutely massive, and it would have tons of these just lined up on its spinal cord. If this is just the vertebrae. If this isn't put into perspective how large this creature really was, I really don't know. This is part of the T-Rex exhibit, which was a Tyrannosaurus that was found by Anthropologists.
Right there, we have part of a cast, I think, of a skull. Here we have a beautiful Dinosaur skull. This is actually a core day of the parking lot right outside of the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. They found dinosaur bone taking the core day. So right in the parking lot of this museum, they found dinosaur bones. And so they had an excavation there. We come around here. We have some cool, this is a Dinosaurus skull. We have this cool Pachycephalosaurid, specifically a Saphirothorus skull, part of the skull there. We come around here. We get some more cool things with a rolling up Dinosaurus, Champiosaurus, which is a aquatic critter there. These are both aquatic. We have the Gilmoris. And we have this cool turtle shell here. Over here, the main excavation part. We have this cool little section here, partial bone bed. Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, and Tyrannosaurus are in here. You can see some Tyrannosaurus teeth. You see some Edmontosaurus toes, or part of the end of the toe, and you can see some other Triceratops. But coming right over here into the T-Rex, this is very late in the Stephen Hill. They are actually decorated with Triceratops right now. You can see part of the Tyrannosaurus skull in the back there. So this is actually a Triceratops that's being excavated. Right, they're not being excavated, they're being trucked right now as we speak. This is a very beautiful, very awesome Triceratops that's just full on display. Over there, that we looked at earlier, we had tried to make our way back over there somehow. This was the T-Rex. The T-Rex that was discovered by young fossil hunters, Jessen and Liam Fisher, along with their cousin Caden Madison. These three people found this Tyrannosaurus, and it was excavated. So you have both parts of the jaw there, it looks like. You have the upper jaw here, and they named it T-Rex because they were a group of teenagers, but also because I think the Tyrannosaurus was unironically a young Tyrannosaurus, if I'm not mistaken. But I also got that fossil palm right there. But this T-Rex was excavated, it was plastered, and it was not rehabilitated. That's not the right one. It was prepared, and now it is on display for us to look at. That is the T-Rex.